Hi folks, Rory at Clawden Painting Studio here. This video is second part in the Box to Battlefield Hobby Basics series, and we're going to be looking at primer, paint and brush selection. Primers are important for preparing the surface of your model to take your later layers of paint. They will adhere to the plastic a lot better than paint out of potwood, and that prevents you having a patchy, blotchy paint job. Comes in many forms. You can buy brush-on primer, you can run it through an airbrush, but for simple beginner level, and indeed the level that I still use, spray can primers are the way to go. It means you can paint a lot of models with primer quickly, and it's not that technique sensitive, though there are some tips that I'll share. So in front of us here we've got three different brands of primer here. I have some Halford's grey. Halford's is an automotive shop here in the UK, and this stuff has the advantage of being cheap. It's about half the price of the Citadel stuff, and a few pounds cheaper than the Army Painter we'll look at as well. Very effective, you get a very smooth coat. It's designed for doing car parts, and I can imagine most car enthusiasts would be a bit annoyed if they had a grainy finish, so Halford's is an excellent choice. Other automotive brands are available, but for £7 or so you can get a big 500ml tin, and that'll last you for ages. Our other two more specialised paints here, we have Citadel, that's Games Workshop's brand, and this is their Wraithbone Contrast Undercoat. Contrast paints are a relatively new thing from Games Workshop. Long and short of it is that they pull in the recesses naturally and leave a shade and a highlight. And you need a light coloured undercoat that's very smooth. And the Wraithbone provides that. This one is a warm off-white. They do one called Grey Seer, which is a more cold off-white. Again, as a smooth surface, good stuff to use. You can use Halford's white primer and still get decent results with contrast paints. And that's half the price of the official stuff. But a very good paint, don't get me wrong, it's very good, and I will use it if I'm doing commission work with contrast paints rather than just my own models. Finally here we've got some Army Painter. Army Painter's colour primers have a huge range of shades. This one is a leather brown. You can see some of the swatch at the top there. Reds, blues, greens, as well as more traditional white, black and grey. They do them all. Yellows, purples even. And if you have models that have primarily one colour, brown would be good for horses, for example. It allows you to basically complete an area of a paint job from the spray can straight away. Not just a primer, but also a finished surface as well. And I do like using the Army Painter cans when I have a big project to tackle. The thing to always consider is what other colours are you going to be using though. I have seen people talk about spraying British Napoleonics red because they've got red coats, but in reality that's a really small area of that model is red and visible. The sleeves basically, you've got lace and strapping and boots, trousers and things like that, which are going to be white, and you'll spend a lot of time picking out those details. So models that have one large area, go for that colour. If anything, if I was painting British Napoleonics, I would either go for white or their skeleton bone, which is an off-white, because that's going to cover most of your overalls, straps, you name it, it's taken care of with the spray primer. Now, when it comes to using these, a couple of tips I would always say. One, read the instructions on the can, they are all a bit different, but in general, warming them with putting them in a bit of warm water for a couple of minutes to get them a bit warmer helps with the consistency of the paint when it comes out, especially in cold winter days like we're having just now. You want a fairly warm paint to spray with. It will flow a lot easier. The other thing as well is shaking them for a full 2 minutes, and actually stand in front of a clock or get a stopwatch out. 2 minutes is a really long time once you start doing it, and I can't advise that enough. In preparing our models for priming, you want to be sticking them to something that's a bit easier to handle than just one model at a time. I have a lolly stick. I have some of my glue dots, which I've featured in a video recently. A nice reusable instant adhesive. And here's the model we prepared last time. We'll put him down on a stick. And we'll get some more of his friends on this stick. And go warm up a can of Halford's Grey and prime from a distance of about 20 to 30 centimetres. And usually after about an hour you're probably safe to paint. I know some people like to leave it 24 hours, but you don't always need to do that if everything feels dry. So here's our 4 Fusiliers and greatcoats all primed. One thing I forgot to say is that I also used a top from a milk bottle, and that's just something to hold to keep my fingers out of the way while I'm spraying. So moving on to our paint selection. I've thought about this quite a lot, and I've tried to come up with 13 paints that I think you should be able to paint most Napoleonic figures with, probably a lot of historical figures, and into fantasy and sci-fi. I'll put a list of them in the description below, but we've got an off-white, a black grey, flat brown, from Vallejo, Army Painter Tanned Flesh, Vallejo Light Grey, Army Painter Plate Mail Metal, Vallejo Prussian Blue, Army Painter Pure Red, Vallejo Deep Green, Vallejo Game Extra Opaque Heavy Ochre, Game Colour Elfic Flesh, Model Colour Brass, again from Vallejo, and Army Painter Dark Tone Wash. Other fleshes, reds, etc. are available from Vallejo. I just happen to have these Army Painter ones. Army Painter do washes as well as Vallejo, so you can pick and choose between them. I think Vallejo have really good coverage, surprisingly well priced for the quality as well. So if you're looking at a couple of paints and if you're in doubt, go for the Vallejo would be my advice. The difference between model colour and game colour, game colours can be a bit more of a satin finish. The extra opaque, like we have the Ochre here, means that it covers really well, lots of extra pigment in it. And instead of getting a yellow from any other range, go for heavy ochre. Yellow is notorious for being really difficult to cover other colours with, even whites. It can be patchy, you need many coats, so this extra opaque, that's my one tip when it comes to painting yellow. I think no matter which colours you're using, the most important thing actually to improve a paint finish is your wash. I hummed and hawed about which one to pick from Army Painter, from light tone, soft tone, strong tone and dark tone. But I think for Napoleonic figures in particular, dark tone is the one to go for. And the reason being is that the chances are you are going to have some dark grey which you want to shade with something, and it needs a black shade to do that. Blue and grey as well, they look better in my opinion with a black shading than a brown shading like you might get from a strong tone. But realistically, it doesn't matter that much as long as you have something to shade with by doing a wash. More on the actual technique in another video. If you want to slightly expand upon these paints, I think adding a lighter tone, so perhaps you could do the flesh or your whites with a different tone from the rest would be helpful. Having something to dilute the wash, such as the Quickshade mixing medium, is a lot more reliable than just water. It spreads the pigment out more equally and leads to less muddy finishes, so it's a good investment. Generally speaking, I find washes to be a bit too thick straight out of the bottle, so having something to thin them is useful. After you've finished painting, I would always consider varnishing as well. A matte varnish will tie the layers of paint together. The reflectivity of all your different paints comes together nicely with the varnish, and it will improve just about any paint job. So that would be the basics. We'll now have a look at brushes. Brushes. Now, perhaps surprisingly, I have a set of generic artificial fibre brushes and a makeup brush here. I think a pack of artist brushes was about £5, and the makeup brush was in a pack of a dozen or so for about the same. So when you're starting out, just go for something cheap. They will not last particularly well, but for a few models as you're getting your toes into painting, yeah, this is what I'd start with. Good variety of sizes. Typically your brush with a point is the one to go for. That will be able to do most of your painting work. Something a bit bigger for when you do your wash. Doesn't really matter if it's a rounded tip or a flat tip for that. The makeup brush is for dry brushing, which is a technique to pick out the raised surfaces of the models, which we'll look at more when we do a video on painting. But these are nice and soft and really cover the surface of the model with an easy action for a decent finish. Once you've got your eye in and you want to consider spending a bit more on brushes, instead of spending £5 on a pack, you can be spending £10–12 on a single brush. The most used brush that I have is my Raphael 8404 size 1. It's superb, really good point, and it has a good belly, which is the volume of bristle that's there for holding a decent amount of paint. I've had that for 8 months now, and with a good care technique, I use some actual artist brush soap. It's lasted far longer than any other brush that I can remember using. If you want something for finer details, a size 0, again sable brush there. Alright, I hope that this video has given some insights into how to choose a primer, working out a core set of paints and where to begin with brushes. We'll be moving on to actually some painting techniques in the next video. In the meantime, if you've got any questions or comments or other suggestions that you think other people would like to read, if you think I've got it all wrong and you want to step in with better suggestions for people, I welcome you to put them down below. This is a community exercise more than anything else, and let's all help each other pass on hints, tips as to how to paint and enjoy the hobby. Thanks guys and girls, and I'll be back soon with another video.